Over the next week, as Reba scoured the city for a house, Barbara Jean found a new confidant. While Brock retreated into his silence and his dental journals, Barbara Jean sat in the parked car in the garage, talking to the satellite. She told Hal about her childhood in Friendly, Texas. She told him about her sister, but ugly Lori Ann. She told him about the loneliness that gnawed at the edges of her bubbly personality. It was a romance of the digital age, a woman seeking a voice in the dark, and a man paid by the hour to listen. Chapter 4: The 7-Day Itch. Reba was exhausted. She had looked at 52 houses in 6 days. She had smelled mold that could melt paint. She had seen foundations that looked like a jigsaw puzzle after an earthquake. She had talked to neighbors who owned more shotguns than teeth. On the 7th day, she sat in the kitchen, defeated. "I got nothing, Van," she admitted when he walked in, looking smug. "Zilch." "You were right. I'm cursed. I look at a house and I see the plumbing failing. I see the termites. I see the catastrophe. I don't have the stones." Van looked at her, and for a moment, the bravado dropped. He saw his mother-in-law, the woman who had held the family together through his own failures and Cheyenne's struggles, looking truly broken. "Well, Mrs. H," Van said softly, "it's a good thing I didn't wait for you." Reba looked up. "What?" "I bought a house." Reba's heart stopped. "You what? Without an inspection? Without me seeing it?" "I had to move fast," Van said, his chest puffing out. "There were 15 other offers. I took it as is. No risk, no reward, right? That's what the flippers do." "Van, as is in real estate means, this house is a portal to hell," Reba screamed. "You used our money, our future on a gamble." "I believe in us," Van said, though his voice wavered slightly. "I believe in your luck. You're like a 4-leaf clover with a temper. Tomorrow, we go see the verdict." Chapter 5: The Revelation in the Driveway. The house was a beige bungalow that looked like it was sighing under the weight of its own existence. Reba stood on the sidewalk, clutching her briefcase like a shield. "I can't do it, Van," she whispered. "If we walk in there, and the inspector tells us the foundation is cracked, we lose everything. I'm not lucky. Every time something good happens, the other shoe drops, and usually it's a heavy boot." Van walked over to her. He didn't look like the goofy kid who put forks in toasters anymore. He looked like a man who understood something Reba had forgotten. "Mrs. H, you think you're jinxed," Van said. "But look at me. When my parents kicking me out, I found a home with you. When I got hurt, you helped me heal. When Cheyenne was struggling with the source, you were the one who kept the light on. Things don't get worse when you're around. They get better. You're not the jinx. You're the cure." Reba felt a tear prick her eye. "Van, that is the sweetest, most manipulative thing you have ever said. I mean it. Now, do you want to back out? I'll take the hit. I'll let you off the hook right now before we hear the report." Reba looked at the house. She looked at Van. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of that old fire. "No, I'm in. Let's see what we bought." The inspector walked out of the front door, wiping his brow. He looked at them solemnly. "Well, the house is a dump." Van's face fell. Reba felt the world tilt. "Just kidding," the inspector grinned. "I love doing that. The house is solid, roof is new, plumbing is copper, and the foundation is like a rock. You guys got a steal." Reba nearly collapsed with relief. "Van, we did it! We're flippers!" As they celebrated, the inspector turned to Van. "Funny though, usually people don't pay for 2 inspections in 1 week." Reba froze. "2 inspections?" The inspector nodded. "Yeah, Van had me out here last Tuesday before he put the offer in." Reba turned to Van, her eyes narrowing. You set me up, the whole lucky speech, the as-is gamble. You knew all along." Van shrugged, a slow, guilty smile spreading across his face. "I believe in you, Mrs. H, but I'm not an idiot. I'm a businessman." Chapter 6: The Shadow of Two Names. Victory, Reba soon discovered, had a very specific scent: stale cigarette smoke and wet dog. That was the primary olfactory profile of the steel van had purchased. As they stood in the living room the following morning, the reality of their situation began to sink in. The walls were a shade of yellow that suggested the previous owners had been heavy smokers or very confused about interior design. The carpet felt like it was alive, and not in a friendly Pixar movie kind of way. "Okay, Van," Reba said, snapping a pair of yellow rubber gloves onto her hands. "We have the house, we have the luck, now we need the labor. If we want to flip this before the bubble bursts, we need to be out of here in 30 days. 30 days? Van scoffed, waving a crowbar around like a scepter. "Mrs. H, I was a linebacker. I can move walls. I can move mountains. A little wallpaper isn't going to stop the Montgomery Hart juggernaut." Suddenly, the front door creaked open, admitting a sliver of bright Texas sunshine and a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that produced smugness and expensive teeth. "Well, well, well," the man said, his voice a smooth, oily drawl. "If it isn't the dynamic duo. And by dynamic, I mean desperate." Reba's spine stiffened. "David Davids, what are you doing here? Did you run out of other people's listings to exploit?" David Davids stepped into the room, his Italian leather loafers clicking ominously on the hardwood floor that was currently covered in grime. He looked around with an expression of performative pity. "I heard you two actually bought this lemon. I'm here as a friend, Reba. A mentor, if you will." "I'd rather take advice from a bag of hammers," Reba snapped. "I'm serious," David said, leaning against a doorframe that looked suspiciously like it had wood rot. "This neighborhood is shifting. The froth is turning into a foam. I'll do you a favor. I'll take this off your hands right now. Full price of what you paid, plus $5,000 for your trouble." Van stepped forward, the crowbar still in his hand. $5,000? You made 50 on the last one, Davy two names. You think we're that stupid?" David smiled, a slow, shark-like expression. "I think you're out of your league. Real estate isn't about heart, Reba. It's about cold, hard numbers. And these numbers, they don't look good for you. You've got 30 days before the interest on that bridge loan starts eating your soul. See you at the auction." He turned and strolled out, the sound of his Porsche idling in the driveway serving as a final insult. Reba looked at Van. The silence in the dusty room was heavy. "He's right about one thing," she whispered. "The clock is ticking." Chapter 7. The Hammer of Justice. The first week of renovation was a descent into a specific kind of hell. Reba, Van, and a very reluctant Cheyenne were the primary labor force. Van's approach to demolition was enthusiastic but unguided. He had managed to take down a non-load-bearing wall in 20 minutes, but he had also accidentally severed a water line that flooded the kitchen. "It's a water feature," Van shouted as he tried to plug the leak with his thumb. "It adds value. It's organic." Reba was currently balanced on a ladder, scraping 3 decades of popcorn ceiling off with a spatula. "Van, if you call one more disaster organic, I am going to bury you in the backyard and tell the police you were a natural fertilizer." Cheyenne was in the corner, wearing a designer face mask and gingerly painting a baseboard. "I don't see why we can't just hire people, Mom. This is ruining my manicure. And the smell? I think I'm developing a permanent allergy to 1,982. We can't hire people because we spent all the money on the down payment and the as-is closing costs." Reba grunted, a flake of ceiling landing in her hair. "Sweat equity. Cheyenne. That's what flips are made of." As the sun began to set, casting long, orange shadows through the bare windows, Brock pulled up in his SUV. He looked tired, but he was carrying several bags of fast food, the universal olive branch of the Hart family. "I brought sustenance," Brock announced, stepping over a pile of discarded drywall. "And news." "Is the news that you've decided to pay for a contractor?" Reba asked hopefully. "No. The news is that Barbara Jean has decided she is a visionary designer," Brock said with a sigh. "She's been watching HGTV for 18 hours straight. She has a mood board. And Reba, it involves a lot of turquoise." Reba closed her eyes. "Lord, give me the stones to survive this." Chapter 8. The Turquoise Temptation. Barbara Jean arrived the next morning like a whirlwind of ruffles and enthusiasm. She was carrying a stack of magazines and a paint fan that was 90% neon.